Well, welcome to Voices of the Valley, the podcast portion of valleyhoopsinsider.com. And our guest there is Bob Belvin, and he is a longtime broadcaster, announcer, voice of the Ohio Valley Conference. A lot of different sports, actually, baseball, football, basketball, but we're in the basketball season, and I don't care about those other sports anyway. But Bob, thanks for joining us. Uh, I was telling you before we came on, I thought I'd go back and look around and see things about Bob Belvin, and found the old video when I interviewed you 3 years ago, and we're in the midst of a snowstorm in St. Louis. And in that video 3 years ago, I said, Bob, we're in a snowstorm. How are you? And oops, you were in a snowstorm. And Bob, here we are again 3 years later.
It's history repeating itself is kind of an understatement when it comes to that, right? But your topic of always discussion is when you're in our part of the world and you talk to folks from the Midwest in January, it's bound to come up, right?
It is totally true.
So it's happening right now. I have an epic storm outside of my house, and it's probably 5 inches or so, and epic is kind of an understatement for Middle Tennessee when you get 5 inches of snow.
Yeah, we got blasted earlier in the week and getting hit all over again.
Yeah.
Hey, how long for you doing broadcasting games in the OVC? I know you had a history at Austin P as an undergrad and all that, so maybe a long time. But in terms of as a professional, how long have you been an OVC broadcaster?
I'm nearing 20 years. I got to thinking about that a while back. Talking to some of the colleagues that have gone on and kind of worked at respective schools, and I kind of fill in for those folks as time goes on, both in the conference and some other conferences that I work in as far as that goes. But really, it's been nearing 20 years. A couple of commissioners ago, I get a kick out of watching John Steinbrecher in the MAC conference, and I knew him when he was commissioner of the OVC, and I look today, I was like, I need to look up how long Beth DeBush has been our commissioner, and it's been 15 years nearly.
I was
right
going to say,
now.
It's been a while now.
Yeah. So when you add all that up and look at that, so yeah, easily, I want to say turn of the century. That might be a little exaggeration, but it's pretty darn close to the year 2000 or so.
In that same video, when I was talking to you 3 years ago, you were saying, yeah, Connor Onion, this young guy is going to come help us out. Connor Onion has exploded. He's all over national TV now. It's fun to watch your friends succeed.
Oh man, it's been fantastic. There's a little bit of envy in it too, Harry. I mean,
sure.
in all candor, there is. But reading and watching him, and it's the classic. I'll text back and forth with him on occasion, and I will say we've had some mutual friends that have had some things come up in their life, and Connor will text me and say, well, "What can I do to help X out, or what can I do to help Y out?" So yeah, he's deep had gone big time on us, if you will. I guess is what I'm trying to put forward. But he's a wonderful guy, and got that break in Major League Baseball last summer with AJ Brzezinski and that group on Fox. Just got the call up like a Wednesday and did Saturday afternoon game, I think. And so yeah, and he's everywhere. I mean, without X or Twitter, I couldn't keep up.
No doubt. I remember I was doing a game at Evansville one time, and he came over to where I was doing the broadcast from, and he was we were just conversing. I said, "Hey, I've listened to you do your stuff. You're doing it great." He goes, "Man, I'm just trying to make it. Thanks a lot." I'm an old guy, and he's thanking the old guy for giving him compliments, and now he's a national name. I mean, it's super exciting to see how that's playing out. Since those 3 years, Bob Belvin, a lot of things have changed. Some teams have left the league. Some teams have come into the Ohio Valley Conference. Could you rate the health present tense of the Ohio Valley Conference?
I would say in progress and in transition still. I think it's a fair assessment of where we are. And, it depends upon, you're looking at football or basketball. I think in a football sense, a fantastic year. They got 3 teams in the FCS playoffs, and that is something that they've been striving for as a league. the three that qualify were all stalwarts of the league, but nonetheless, getting three in football is a big deal. Basketball, with the new contract with ESPN, where they're getting the kind of exposure that they need. Last year being able to have Western Illinois, a game originating from there, and that is still that work in progress. And I don't mean that in a demeaning way by no stretch. It's just you've got to get into your tentacles, if you will, into these media markets and get the kind of exposure that is necessary in some of them. And then you're fighting against a lot of established names and the old legacy medias that still refer to now, and trying to get in that arena. But I think the conference overall continues to have not necessarily growth pains, but again, settling in progress kind of thing. And this basketball race, we're going to talk about, you're probably going to see some familiar names and some not so familiar names, and that's not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to balance and fan interest. And I think that's what you're always striving for. You're striving for the clicks, the mentions, the likes. That's where I think the OVC is beginning to make a lot of inroads.
Yeah, they're making great progress, I think, on the social media side as well, and doing a great job there. You mentioned new names, old names. We had Preston Spradlin leading that Morehead State team, and they were spectacular. He goes off and gets a job, takes a higher profile job, and oops, Morehead State's tied for first place. Like, no problem, and you've got some other programs that are still feeling their way through. SEMO kind of has risen out of the ashes all of a sudden. We'll talk about all that, but I thought when Morehead signed Johnny Maddox, and I thought when UT Martin signed Jeremy Schulman, they landed some outstanding coaches.
Yeah, and that's the difference. And it's a stretch parallel, but bear with me. If you'll look at what the SEC did when they had their football established, and Greg Sankey come out and said, "Hey, basketball guys, elevate schools, elevate your programs to where they're of this level of prominence." And I think the OVC has done just that. The level of coaching, and we talked about those departures, Preston Spradlin, Ryan Ritter, going on to a higher D1 job when he left UT Martin. I mean, there's a lot of examples where we can find it within the league. And that's what, if you're the casual fan, you got to pay attention. There's a lot of moving parts, not only with the players, but with the coaches. And it's all been for really solid reasons, and kind of been, a beginning point for a lot of these, mid-major and higher coaching jobs. And yeah, Preston's done a pretty good job. James Madison, he upset Arkansas State last week, who was preseason #1 in Sunbelt. So he and Scott got to work in there.
Yeah, I try to stay up with those guys and even reach out to them. I'll interact with them, text and phone calls and whatnot, because I become a fan, right? I become a fan of that guy, not just that program. But boy, I'm a big fan of Johnny Maddox's as well, and he's doing a great job at Morehead State. I want to talk about the race a little bit. 2 gigantic games tomorrow. Tennessee Tech has won 4 in a row. They're in my neck of the woods here, taking on 3-2 SIUE. But Morehead State, as we mentioned, 9-7. They're at SEMO, 9-7. Both of them 4-1 in the league. And with the quick roster changeover that we see in all of college basketball these days, but particularly in a place like the OVC, these coaches landed on their feet, and they're building forward in 2 big games tomorrow.
Yeah, and if you compare those rosters of those 3 that you mentioned and put them side by side, 23-24, and 22-23, 23-24, not a lot of similarities.
No.
A lot of them. And so again, that's back to my point about really the coaching, and just putting these rosters together and melding them. Well, Morehead State, if you want to delve into them right now, one of the better shooting teams in the conference. I got some pretty good numbers in there, shooting better than 43% from the field and better than 32% from 3-point range. That's still a little bit of that blueprint that was left them by Preston Spradlin. But, in the end here, you still got to get the personnel to make it happen. And I think they've been able to do that. And they're scoring, I believe, if I check my notes here, the best scoring team in the conference, scoring better than 70 a game. And that's all games, not just conference only. So, and they played some pretty big schools too.
I was looking at the league only numbers, and this is something Preston did. I mean, so, emphasized. was rebounding. They're the number one team in the OVC in rebound margin in league games only,
Yeah.
and so they're continuing to do that thing. I don't know how well you know Johnny Maddox. I mean, he was in the league and then he was gone. He was at Murray, but he is a guy that is passionate about what he's doing. He's invested in his players, and it's rubbing off.
Well, and you have to speak to just the geography of where Morehead State is too, Harry. I mean, it goes without saying. It's a difficult place to recruit to. The facilities are not up to par with some others that are there, in all candor. It's a split school in a conference too, because they don't play football in a conference. So a little bit, and you're half hour out of Lexington. I mean, it's hard to make hay there. And Johnny has done just that. And here's the other statistic about 9-7 Morehead State. Let me count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the 5 of their starters have started all 16 games. So that obviously includes all the league games as well. But 4 of them are shooting better than 50% from the field.
That consistency, because I started poring over the OVC rosters, just to get more familiar. And so many of the schools are battling injuries. And you mentioned that Morehead, they're healthy. Kenny White, I think, is their leading scorer, and he comes off the bench. And he's a guy that was in the league, left, went to the Missouri Valley. Now he's back in the league, and I think he's his 3rd OVC program. But Kenny White Jr. is a guy that's been around, and OVC fans know all about him.
Yeah, and that's been the big help to Johnny Maddox when he just came in, to be able to get White back into this league. And you'll drive yourself crazy if you start looking at all the places these players have been. We've got a lot of players that formerly come from the MVC, but also have come from some of the big rivals, their conference rivals as well, that have left. It's nuts.
It is crazy. The NIL, the free agency portal pandemic is what I call it, has revolutionized the game for better or worse. It's just what's real. But Morehead State 4-1, they're at SEMO, and Brad Korn has turned that roster around after 2 years ago. They weren't very good. And, after they won the OVC tournament a couple years ago, then they had a bad year. And here they are right back at it, 9-7, 4-1 in the league. They're number 1 in the league in scoring, in conference games anyway. But Washington, Martin, a number of guys. Yeah, Stecker, who's, missed games early and has really bolstered them. BJ Ward, who's as a guy that is from St. Louis here, who didn't do a lot last year, but all of a sudden he's playing a big role. Talk a little bit about the Redhawks.
Well, first of all, I think a lot of Brad Korn, and I think those first 2 seasons were really difficult for him, just getting his arm around it. And to think how close they were from not making the NCAA tournament with that 3-point decision there, and having to go overtime or not, where they thought they had lost the game to Tennessee Tech in that fantastic tournament, I think 2 seasons ago. I think this team kind of resembles him. Brad's just kind of, in my estimation, all those tall and slender, and the guy that always got the inside rebounds, and he's just got that Midwestern flavor. That's not a knock on him, but what I'm getting at is he's been able to incorporate that team together to kind of fits his image. I don't think there's a coach in the league that has done that any better than Brad has done at that SEMO team. And I think this might be the year, not necessarily a lot of no names, but this tandem you mentioned of Stecker, Washington, and Terry combined, or that trio, are the best 3 starting threes or leading scorers in the league, in that team alone. And so I think he's gonna do well there. He's a quiet guy. Brad's kind of hard to get to know if you're only around him as infrequently, frankly, as I am. But he's all basketball all the time. I really enjoy when I'm around him. But you can kind of see that of the teams that are kind of in this conference, they kind of take on the identity of their coach perhaps more than others do when it comes to Brad Korn.
Yeah, and Rob Martin doing a great job running the point for those guys, a young man from here in St. Louis. And I saw them early in the year when they played SLU, I guess it was, or maybe it was Bradley. It was Bradley, I think, early in the year. I went and saw them. But anyway, and then Tennessee Tech is also 4-1. They've won 4 straight. And I don't know if you're like me, Bob, but I kind of left Tennessee Tech for dead a while ago. Early in the season, they didn't look very good. They were struggling, and and they have just found a way. And now 4 in a row, and here they are, tied for first.
Yeah, and this is kind of a back to that theme of new teams, turnovers, rosters, and John Pelfrey. He's in a bit of trouble. He struggled in all candor. I mean, he struggled in his time at Tennessee Tech. We mentioned the SEMO tournament game a few seasons ago, and that they really set them back last season, Harry. It just really did. And then, to your point, it didn't look so great early on, and then they seem to have caught fire here as they've gotten in the conference. And that game tomorrow, when they're at SIUE. If you can't get to it, okay, join Harry there. You might want to tune that one in. That's a really good matchup and I think of two teams that are kind of similar as well, but they're also, when it comes to Tech, averaging 74 points a game. While that doesn't seem like a jump out at you number, you look at on average, and I'm back to league play only. When you're on average and looking at the statistics across the board of these teams, 74 kind of jumps out at you. And
conversely, SIUE, Brian Baroni's team there, they are the dead last team offensively and the number 1 team defensively.
You bet.
And you talk about a team taking on a coach's personality. They enjoy one another. There's a family feel around that SIUE program. They lost their first 2 conference games, both on the road. Now they've won 3 in a row and put themselves right back knocking at the door. And obviously, Rashawn Taylor is the guy that kind of makes them go.
Well, yes, no doubt. It has been, and now he's become their leading scorer in their D1 tenure. Rashawn Taylor is. But you know what? When you look at his numbers, he's like, oh, this guy should be 22, 23, 24 game. He's not.
Nope.
He's in the mid-teens per game in scoring, which there's no knock to that. But my point being is that he plays so much bigger and so much of a bigger role in this team. And you're right. If ever a team took on an identity of a coach whose family has been in the business of coaching forever, it's SIUE. Great follow on Twitter. I'm not I mean, we all like the water bottle showers in the locker room after coach coming around the corner and getting doused and things like that. There may be a more appropriate name for that event, but whatever it may be. But you could feel that, to your point, Harry. It's got that family feel to it. I think the whole university does as far as that goes. But when you look at what Brian Baroni has done, that's a classic. You hear the football guys talk about brick by brick all the time, but that has been a classic when it comes to what Brian has done at SIUE. That's what it's been. It's been incremental. It's been year over year. It's been retain what I've got with the Taylors and then add a piece as time goes on.
Yeah, he's done a great job. Now 10 wins this year. I don't think they had been above 12, maybe 14, their whole D1 experience before he got there. Then they had a 19-win year, a 17-win year last year, and on their way to similar numbers again this year.
And
go ahead.
And not to forget with SIUE, they lost their 2 first conference games.
Yeah.
They went on the road, and it's like, wow, what's going on here? To your point, since then, they've really turned it around, and that's what makes that Tech game tomorrow a whole lot of fun.
Going to be a big game for them. And Lindenwood is home tomorrow. That's the other team in my area. And I wanted to ask you about Lindenwood and Southern Indiana and Western Illinois. Now, those are 3 very different programs. Western Illinois, long time established in Division I. But USI and Lindenwood now, I guess, in their 3rd year in Division I and in the OVC. How do you think that transition has gone for those 2 particular programs?
I think they've struggled a bit with it. In all 3 cases, but Lindenwood at SIUE, I think there was a belief coming into their entrance into the league, and particularly in basketball, where it's like kind of a home game here for the OVC tournament. In the case of Southern Indiana, right?
Right.
It's like and their women's team has been outstanding. The men's team with Stan Gerard. I don't really have a feel for where their direction is. And I'm not trying to be critical, but we would have thought they would have been a little bit more. I think they spent the first season looking around the league going, a pretty good basketball league. It's somewhat of a step up from where we come. And in terms of classification, it should be. I mean, with all due respect. But I think the level of play in the conference and then getting in that tournament, you just kind of see the look on a lot of their faces, and they got to Evansville, and they're like, yeah, this is a little bit different. And since then, they've gone out and they've recruited a different type of player, and I think that's to their credit.
Lindenwood's been decimated by injuries this year, and they're fighting through it. Got a win against Tennessee State the other night, and they have UT Martin tomorrow. But those two teams, initially both of them had kind of decent first years, and then kind of took a step back. And it seems like now this year they're still not succeeding greatly, but they actually feel like OVC teams now.
They do, and I think I think a big part of that is stabilizing their rosters. I remember after the first OVC tournament in which Southern Indiana was in, I was talking to Stan Gerard. They did make it to the first round in Evansville. I remember talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm going to lose." He already knew at that time, I'm going to lose this player and this player, and they're going to go to a higher D1 or they're going to go, and that's really what I got to focus on, and I don't know where I'm going to get it from kind of conversation. Well, he did. I mean, it did, but it might not have been the player he had, to your point, in that first season in the league, and partially responsible for kind of their drop off last season. And you remember, it took Lindenwood a crazy last final regular season game last year to make it into the tournament. That was a crazy game how that ended. And
they had, I think, back-to-back overtime games that they had to win somewhere, and it's been bizarre. Final couple of thoughts before I let you go, and I appreciate you doing this with me today and catching up with you. The league, I think, is like 28th in Ken Palm, something like that in the net. What do you think may be the key ingredients to helping the league get to 27, 26, 25 to be more relevant in that national conversation? It's a difficult mountain to climb.
Yeah, it is. I don't know that I really have the answer, because
you're the expert. That's why I'm having you on.
Well, I think they're trying a lot. I think the respective schools are trying a lot of different formulas to raise that.
Sure.
To help collectively raise that Ken Palm number up. Undoubtedly, I think some of it. So what's incremental improvement, right? I mean, do we move from 28th to 24th, and that maybe gets us the team on the bubble after the turn? Some of the. Well, we could do a deep dive for hours, but I think some of the non-conference games that these teams played among those teams haven't turned out to be as strong as you thought they were too. And you always make that argument when you get into respective conference seasons, no matter the conference you're in, ACC, SEC, OVC. It's like, well, it's that battle. Not getting players rated might be a starting point to it. But collectively, it's really hard to move the needle from where you are right now. It just really is.
It's difficult in this NIL world, because not all of these schools have to compete and have to figure out the NIL component. And that's a whole new ball game. And most of these schools are in smaller communities, so less resources. They have a big mountain to climb. And then you were saying this earlier. I think then when we see these teams succeed, what we're seeing is coaches that know how to build according to the way they want to build it, and then coaching in an effective way. I think the premium is on the coach and their ability to succeed. And I think we're seeing that with a number of these coaches.
You are, but can you keep them? I mean, that's been the $1 million question throughout it when you get to come to leagues like the OVC. And to your point, the NIL component, I'm looking at it across the board, because I have the opportunity to do some Conference USA work. I do some Sun Belt. And when I look, it's like, wow. And frankly, in some of the cases, Harry, you just got to hope that you've got a sugar daddy alumnus.
Sure.
Or I'm speaking in some. I can speak to some specifics from not far from where I sit and have this conversation with you. But that's what you've got to have in some of these markets, and some of these. You look at an SIUE that's right in the fringe of St. Louis, Lindenwood, the same. It's just the development. In my quote real job in the banking world, I'm a development officer too, so I know what it's like to go out and try and secure those funds, get those deposits, and that's where the action really happens. That kind of begins the acceleration in the NIL process, in my humble opinion, and that is getting out and raising money and having that available there. And then and a lot of times these coaches, you talk about Johnny Maddox and you talk about Jerry Schulman at UT Martin in particular, they're just darn good coaches.
Yep.
Number one. Number two, they don't really have, and none of these coaches in this league, in all candor, really have a list of 3 or 4 kids that they would love to have if they were able to get X amount of money for them in that spot. And so that's what I like about this league selfishly, because it's just pure competitive. It's really, really down to is your guy better than my guy in a one-on-one situation, and then can I outcoach you and with what I've got to work with when you get to that. And it's a lot of fun to watch at this level, because in my opinion, it's the purest of levels that you're going to look at when you look at the NIL world and how the landscape has changed.
Final question. Tell us what it's like to be at the OVC tournament in Evansville. You work those games a lot and you're around it a lot. I think the Ford Center is spectacular. And I think having the teams there and the format there is a little different than I'm used to here in the Missouri Valley Conference. But just talk about the environment and what is happening in Evansville in that second week of March.
Well, I'll tell you what, one of the things I enjoy about it is you don't have to go outside in the weather.
The hotel is across the street, is what he's saying. There's a pathway. Yes,
it has a breezeway across. That's very Middle Tennessee selfish, but I had to put that in nonetheless. I think the agreement and the situation that the OVC and the city of Evansville has been fantastic in terms of accommodations and the way the city comes out for the event. And that's been a part of the reason why I believe the OVC has renewed their relationship with Evansville, I believe, for another 2 more seasons. It's a big time arena, but it's small enough to still be close to the size of what these teams play in as you go on. It's always fun to watch the loading dock when the bands come in and they have their own area, that they can warm up in, that they can leave their personal belongings in, their instruments in. It's super secure building. It's just very, very centric toward the student athlete. It's geared toward, and because I'm employed by them and because I'm supposed to say wonderful things about them, I'm going to. The OVC is very centered on the student athlete experience, and I know that's part and parcel of your question, and that's how I want to really answer it. It's really geared to that. I mean, there's obviously plenty of room. It's a big arena. There's plenty of room to work around. There's plenty of room to accommodate multiple teams. And the player entrance there is lit with your team, your school logo. There's just a lot of accommodations made for the student athlete, for the bands, for the support, the cheer staff, all of that. There's always plenty of room there. You're comfortable, and it just has a big time feel to it in comparison to some of the other arenas they play in. And that's what really kind of drives the experience beyond the teams just themselves wanting to make that tournament. It's a complete package. Great food, great venue, and just a lot of accoutrements, if you will, for the working media there too. So I go over and watch a lot of the games I'm not involved in or calling, just because it's just relaxed. it's just fun. It's a good time. It's kind of a reunion too, as time goes on, and I think that's important. From the administrative, the presidents, those kind of folks, it's kind of important for them to get together too, as well, with the OVC staff and just the entire community.
It always ticks me off that it's the same weekend as the
It
Missouri
is
Valley Conference.
March Madness. Yeah,
I know I'd love to be at that tournament. Uh, I just appreciate your time today and all that you do in the league. The thing that I love about the OVC and about that tournament and tournaments like Arch Madness and around the country in what I would call the mid-major or low major, whatever we call some of these conferences, is they are, for better or worse, they're playing for their postseason life.
yes,
and so those games have every ounce of passion in them that you can imagine a basketball game.
Yeah, they do, and that's when you get to Saturday, it gets kind of it's pretty tense. The mood kind of changes in all candor when you get to Saturday. You got to make it. It's one and done.
Appreciate you, Bob Belvin. You can watch his work on ESPN, a lot of different leagues, but particularly in the OVC and around the OVC tournament. Bob, appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Harry. Great to see you, and do good.
Appreciate that, my friend. Remember, everybody, since you've been there, make it a better place. We'll see you again real soon.